Right, so I hope that everyone can hear me well. If you're watching live, welcome. And hopefully we don't have any sound difficulties, as we have had technical difficulties in the past month since we've begun. Thankfully, Brother Michael Trojanowski, he helped navigate me through a lot of the sound issues. So hopefully that won't be an issue this time. And we're praying to that end. We're praying also that we can continue to live stream to wherever you are and continue to present messages that are relevant, especially increasingly so as things are getting quite turbulent. We're living in a very difficult time where the shaking is becoming prevalent in all of our lives in some way. I think we've all seen or know somebody who has been shaken out from the truth, that is beginning to give up the law of God, give up the prophetic messages, to give up the light that has been shining in respect to the glory of God from the Word and the foundations that we've been really building on for several centuries. So we definitely want to be steadfast and movable. We want to make sure that we're not being tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine, but we also want to be humble enough, because we know that the doctrine of truth, as it comes and it proceeds from the throne of God, comes to us as rain. And so we want to be among that class that receives the rain, but we don't want to be among that class that, even though it rains on the weeds still grow up because they've hardened themselves and they've resisted, and they're just all the more ready for burning. We want to be amongst those who are fitted, who are ready. And so I hope that you can hear me well. I'm being told that the audio is cutting out, but I hope that it won't be too bad. From Iowa, frozen. That's not good. What is frozen, Wendy? So you said that we're frozen. It's good if I can be heard. It's better if I can be seen, especially because we have a PowerPoint presentation. So, by the way, welcome for those of you who are watching, whether from YouTube. Thank you for. I guess my wife is also on, so it's good to see you. But yeah, okay. So the picture is frozen. Let me see if I can see if the. Okay, it looks okay to me. Looks like I can get some movement. It shouldn't be freezing. It's unusual. Okay, let me just check to make sure that everything is going well. I want to make sure that you guys can see me well. Let's see, Wendy, am I frozen? Just get her to try to refresh. I want to make sure that that everything is going well and that you're all able to see me. But I noticed that the viewers just dropped quite substantially. So usually that happens when there is an issue with viewing. Are you able to see me? I hope so. It's okay now. Perfect. Thank you so much, Wendy. Now, let me get my PowerPoint up, and we will look at the subject after we begin in prayer. I'm glad that the sound is working this week, and we worked through a lot of reasons. I realize now that our mic, that it has a battery short in it. So, and if it's plugged to the wrong USB, it will get a lot of feedback and interference, which would totally make the message without effect because you're not able to hear it. So thankfully, that's restored now. Now, I do have a heavy burden upon me, and I want to tell you about that burden because of what's been going on as of late, and I will share with you some of those details. But at this moment, I just want to invite you to pray with me, and then I'll share with you my deep founded concerns at this time. Merciful, loving Father, Abba Yah, I want to thank you that we can come before you to your throne of grace and mercy. We can enter in through the open gates, through the Prince of Hosts. We want to thank you, Father, for Prince Emmanuel. We want to thank you for the bloodstained banner, and that, Father, that through what he has poured out and what you have accomplished and wrought through him, we might come before you boldly, not because of anything that we do, not because of our flesh, not because of our blood, but because, Father, of all that you have accomplished through the name of your Son, Yeshua. So we want to thank you for him whose name is salvation. We want to ask that you will be with us. I'm asking, Father, that you will be with me, that you will be with my lips, that you'll lay your hand upon my head, that I will be able to speak those things that you would have me to speak, say those things that you would have me to say, and Father, that your name through this time spent together might be glorified, and Father, that there might be of your flock those who are more deeply founded on your words. You know, there's much heaviness upon me for the things which are happening. But I'm asking, Father, that you will help me to cover that which needs to be covered and to address various issues with regard to the question of health and the health message and the living testimony, and as well as the fearfulness of being ever severed or separated from you. We want to know you. So please cause us to walk with you and to worship you in spirit and in truth, because you seek such to worship you. We thank you so much and we praise you in the wonderful name of your beloved Son, Yeshua. Amen. All right, so let me get the screen up here, make sure that we have it on. And okay. So I want to share with you something of a burden that I have and why I'm doing this particular presentation today. The presentation is called Life or Death, the Power of Principle. And of course, as you can see, the picture there, you have two tables, one on the left and one upon the right, and really the power to choose. But of course, there's appetite, right? And where would you take your fill, and at whose table would you find yourself? Would you be at King Nebuchadnezzar's table, or would you be at Yeshua, the King of Kings' table? And where would you find yourself, and why? My great concern as of right now, as of late, is that many people are making of no effect the testimonies of the Spirit of God, the Spirit of prophecy. I see many people getting away from the law of God. I see many people getting away from the Spirit of prophecy. I see many people that are departing from the faith. That those who are adhering to their own judgment are actually thinking that they are led more of God than those who have had visions of God. There is criticisms in some respects going on Ellen White's writings, but it's going further than that to even extending towards the scriptures. There are many things which are not being rightly applied with regard to the Bible, and those things, thus misunderstood, will make shipwreck of the faith of some if those ideas and sentiments are not corrected. We don't want to come to the conclusion, and we don't want to make the idea that if you are a vegetarian, if you have a plant-based diet, if you're vegan, or if you're raw fruitarian, whatever you might be, you don't want to come to the point where you're imposing that view upon somebody who is eating meat and working through a process in the Word of God. You also have to understand that the Word of God does have places where meat eating is found. The priest would consume meat. We will look at that. And then we know that this was also, after the flood, it was something that was permitted. And so we want to look also a little bit at that. We don't want to go too extensively in this, but we will look at that. Because my great concern is that people are falling away from the faith because of appetite, but mostly because they're stumbling over what they thought they believed, because they had believed extreme ideas, sentiments, and views, and things have been overstated, and now they're stumbling on the ideas that they thought they believed. You know, there's a very, very strong brother who, non-Trinitarian, believer in one true God and his only begotten Son, really just a very powerful ministry. He was raised up in Amazing Facts ministry, and he was sort of an associate pastor of sorts. And unfortunately, because he had some health complications, he began to take on eating meat. And when he began to do that, he began to, because of the extreme dissonance that comes through having an overstated view of matters and an unhealthful view of matters, he said, well, okay, if this is false, then that must be false. And so he began to feed very extensively and heavily on everything he could to try to not only discount, okay, if there's no health message, then this is a problem and that is a problem. And there are many people right now who are going to a keto diet, and they're seeing a lot of success, maybe a meat-eating diet. You've probably heard of Peterson. What is his name? Name's not coming to me now, but he's really well-known psychologist from Canada, and him and his daughter are meatarians. They only eat meat. That's all they eat. They eat red meat, and you can imagine how healthy that is for you. But they say that a lot of complications have helped them. Now, why is that the case? And is there any basis for that when you look at the Spirit of Prophecy, that that could be the case, that there's a possibility there, that there's some room for that? And the shocking answer is yes. But I want to elaborate on that. I do want to get into certain things today, because I would like to get the preconceived, wrong, extreme ideas that have been overstated, misstated, and let's go back to the balanced view of things. And we want to have the way that is not going into one ditch or another, causing people to stumble, even though it looks like it should be good. We want to not give the impression also to unbelievers that we are of the class who command people to abstain from meats. Of course, the word meats in the scripture that Paul was referring to, he says, commanding men to abstain from the food which was created to be eaten with thanksgiving. He's not just talking about like flesh meats. He's not talking about, you know, whether it's cattle or lamb or whatever. He's speaking specifically about mandating fasting, which does happen. Okay, so with that, let me get this presentation going. Make sure there's no comments. All right, Chris, I'm glad that you're here. Armand, it's good to see you, brother, or at least good to see you there. And all right, I'm so glad to have some of you with us. Now, let's look at this subject. Now, Armand, we've talked a lot about that, haven't we? We've talked a lot about this subject, and I know that Lynn, I've talked with about this as well, because there are some issues that are really challenging with regard to this, especially with those who are having a lot of health complications at this moment. We have to understand that there was a commandment with respect to food in the Garden of Eden. So when God gives a commandment, we should not look with impunity upon that commandment. We should look at commands and we should say, to understand the nature of those things and to go only as far as God commands and not an inch further and not an inch less. We don't want to diminish in the least. We don't want to add thereto in the least, because I will show you what happens when you add thereto. Genesis chapter 2, verse 16 and 17, it says, "And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou shalt eat thereof, thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." So that's a commandment. It's very, very clear. Eat this, you will die. All right? That's so there's a judgment and there is a decree for against. There is a commandment and there's a decree for the transgression, the violation, the overstepping of that commandment. We know that the story about what happened with regard to Eve. It says, "Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, We may eat of the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest you die." Okay. Now, the commandment is good. And the commandment, when Satan comes in like a flood, we should say, "It is written," or "God has said." Yes, absolutely. God has spoken. If God has spoken, God has spoken forever. Okay? And we shouldn't have any issue with that. We know that Christ came, Yeshua came, to abolish death, to take away death. And if Yeshua came to take away death, we would be silly to think that we're not going to be restored back to the way that it was when there was deathlessness. And those who want to continue killing, let's say, animals to consume food, or let's just say those who want to beautify themselves for the sake of appearance, let's just say that, or dress immodestly, are common things that people stumble over every day, right? Food is a very simple thing because dietary habits are very easy to just kind of look over and not keep it, whether it's staying up too late, which I know I've done a lot of times, or just overeating, right? Or not nourishing your body properly, not getting sufficient exercise, ingesting the wrong kinds of things, drinking the wrong kinds of things. There's just a number of different things. Staying indoors too much, not getting enough fresh air. There's a number of different things that can impair your health, and it can have serious consequences. But we know that this was a command that God had given, that you shall not eat of it lest you die. Right? But Eve said something more than what we see in the command, right? We're told that God specifically commanded the man. This is masculine singular when it says the man. It means that he had commanded Adam. Okay? And the Lord God commanded ha-Adam in Hebrew. Okay? It's a masculine singular. It means he was speaking specifically to Adam, and then he formed Eve. Well, you know I like to get into not only the spirit of prophecy, but also into some of the extra biblical writings because of other presentations I've already showed you, and if you don't know about that, you can ask me about the apocryphal presentations, which Ellen White said the wise in the last days should understand those books. You want to understand them. There's a good reason for it. Review and Herald, February 24th, 1874. Eve had overstated the words of God's command. In Eve's controversy with the serpent, she added, "Neither shall you touch it." Here the subtlety of the serpent appeared. This statement of Eve gave him advantage. He plucked the fruit and placed it in her hand, using her own words. He has said, "If you touch it, you shall die." You see no harm comes to you from touching the fruit, neither will you receive any harm from eating it. Okay? Now, you can see that, when you're in controversy with somebody, you're debating with somebody, sometimes you want to leverage arguments that are not wholly sound. This is wrong. You should only stick to the arguments which are absolutely sound. And if your arguments are not, if they're not kosher, if they're not sound, the sooner you learn about it, probably the better. But you don't want to be unsettled from the truth if you're just a babe in the truth as well, right? So you always want to keep yourself open to the evidence, whatever God may give, and be satisfied with the weight of evidence, understanding that there may be more evidence in the future to show and to weigh into another view, right? I've seen that happen to me again and again and again. I wish I could say that I've always used an argument that is not wholly sound, or that I've never used one. But I'm sure at times I have. But over the years, I've cultivated the desire to use only arguments that I'm satisfied with as I am seeking to pursue the truth. I don't want to just convince people of an idea simply because I adhere to those ideas. I want to know, why do I adhere to those ideas? Are they sound? Do they make sense? Are they logical? And ultimately, are they acceptable in the sight of God? Well, Satan will take, if you give him just a little bit of space and you overstate something, the overstatement can get you into great trouble. We don't want to overstate God's command, but God's command is God's command. We don't want to understate it either. It may seem wise not to touch something, but it wasn't commanded. Let's look at what it says in the books of Jasher. This is 1 Jasher. Again, this is not the rabbinic Jasher that most people are common with, although there's a lot of very similar connections. This is based on many manuscripts that have been reviewed. But this is very interesting, speaking about the creation, okay, and specifically Adam. It says, then the Lord said unto Michael, this is the archangel Michael, and we have another study on that showing that that's very definitely, clearly Yeshua, Jesus. Behold, we have made Adam in our image after our likeness, and the Lord gave unto him his commandments and warned him against disobeying them. And the Lord God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for on the day that thou eat thereof thou shalt surely die. Okay, you've heard that. It's not too much new there, right? It's pretty standard stuff. God gave him a commandment. He said, don't transgress. If you transgress, you will die. That's fairly obvious. We continue going on. It says, and the Lord God took Adam and his wife, and he set them in the Garden of Eden to dress and to keep it. And Adam commanded Eve and said unto her, from every tree of the garden thou mayest eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it, for in the day that thou shalt eat thereof thou shalt surely die, rather. Therefore touch not anything of it. Oh, that was a mistake. But it wasn't a mistake, was it? That's a husband wanting to protect his wife. When he is warned about something and he knows the fate that will be incurred because of something, he wants to shelter, he wants to protect, right? He wants to build the walls of safety around his house. That's exactly what Adam wanted to do, and it makes sense that husbands are that way, because it was in him to begin with, and it's been inherited by husbands till the present time. Any husband that doesn't desire to protect his own family, you must say something is misfiring in the wiring, right? Because that's not how it's supposed to be. There should be a desire to protect, especially from Satan and his and of course the enemy of souls. So there's a command, and there's a wise principle, because listen, you start touching it and maybe you're going to like, oh, it's actually pretty nice. Maybe just a little bite, right? But if you don't touch it, you don't have any time to linger long at the tree. You're not thinking much about it, and you're not tempted to take the deep dive into transgression, right? So there's wisdom there. but it wasn't a commandment. There was wisdom. Adam didn't overstate anything, but Eve overstated things. Watch this. And the angels of Samael, that's another name for Satan, by the way. It means hatred. It's actually a word that's used in the Hebrew Bible. You can find this name used several times in the Hebrew. And the angels of Samael said, "Let us take counsel against Adam so that he sins against his Creator, that we may overcome him." And Samael said, "How can we cause him to sin and drive him away from his presence?" And he said, "I know that the Lord said to them in the day that you eat thereof, that in the day that they eat thereof, they shall surely die. But I shall go and tempt them, so they may eat and be punished, and I shall take possession of the earth for myself." So here's the goal. How can we cause him to sin, to separate him, and then fall under the dominion of the angels? How can we cause him to separate, and then now who's going to be the prince over this world? It'd be Satan, right? That was the goal, to get them into the rebellion that they themselves were partaking of. Therefore, he descended with all his legions and sought a companion like himself upon the earth. And he looked upon every creature which God had made with man in the earth. And finding the serpent, he entered into it that he might draw near to Eve, and that he might entice her to transgress the commandment of God, which he had commanded them. And he drew nigh unto the woman, saying, "Hath God truly said, Ye shall not eat of every tree of the garden?" And she answered, "We may eat of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat of it, neither shall you touch it, lest you die. Howbeit she enjoined two things which he commanded not. And the serpent mocked at her, saying, Who can believe that thou shalt surely die? Be not afraid." You can see, just like how Jesus would always say, "Be not afraid," right? You can see how Satan now is taking on the appearance of a benefactor. Be not afraid. For when thou shalt eat thereof, thou shalt know good and evil. It is only in envy that God hath said it. For he hath known that if ye eat thereof, your eyes will be opened, and ye shall know that ye are gods, even as he. God is willing to deceive thee, for he was like unto thee as long as he had not eaten of that fruit. But when he ate thereof, he reached the glory of God. Therefore he spake unto thee not to eat of that fruit, that ye should not become like unto him, and partakers of his glory and of his throne. And he touched the tree, and said unto the woman, Thou sayest, The Lord has forbidden thee to touch it. Behold, I have touched the tree, and have not died. Thou also mayest touch it, and shall not die. And she touched the tree. And he said, Verily, follow thou me, and I shall go and pluck of its fruit. Then the serpent arose and plucked the fruit of the tree, and gave it unto Eve. And when Eve beheld the serpent touch the tree, and that he did not die, she said within herself, The charge of my Lord is false. Do you see how in the subtlety of the serpent, how the overstatement, that she had misinterpreted her husband's words, her husband's charge to her. And that was the loophole that Satan used to get through to Eve. He was looking for a loophole. He was looking for a breach. He was looking for some kind of flaw in her understanding. And when he found it, he was able to take down the whole house. So when she says the charge of my Lord is false, she's speaking about her husband. Very, very serious. Now, let me just check, make sure nobody's having problems hearing me. I hope not. It seems to be okay. All right. Now, there's some real issues that I have seen. And the issues really come down to how people are looking at the book of Daniel. I want us to look at the book of Daniel because it's very important that we understand this subject rightly, because we know that Daniel had abstained from meat, specifically the king's meat. And recently it was said to me by a very conscientious brother, did you know that Daniel did not eat meat all of his life? I said, yeah, obviously. Why? I didn't know that. And he started eating meat. He didn't have to not eat meat. Well, I knew that he didn't have to not eat meat. Well, why would you think this? Well, he had come to an overstated position on Daniel chapter 1, which took the whole ministry of Daniel in his mind and made it something that it was not. And by overstating matters, he went to a very dark place, which I'm once in a while still messaging him and trying to reason with him, because I realize that because of overstated positions, he's now casting away his confidence in the spirit of prophecy. And not just him, but pretty well the whole congregation that he has with him. They've pretty well done this, and I'm very, because I love these brethren. They're very precious to me. I think they're honest and studious, but if our studies are guided by our own judgment and not by the judgment of God, and we have wrong ideas, Satan will use the breaches in our understanding, the overstatements, however little they may be, to cause us to fall. We need to make sure our positions are sound. I can't stress that enough. I know that that's very serious. I cannot stress that enough, because anything you have that's wrong, whether it's diminishing or adding thereto, could be the very thing that he causes you to fall. God help us, by the way. I'm going to read Daniel chapter 1 for you so you can have a little bit of the background. I'm going to go through very quickly. I invite you to read it with me, and we'll check this out. It says, in the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem, and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, with part of the vessels of the house of God, which he carried into the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and he brought the vessels into the treasure house of his God. And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom and cunning and knowledge and understanding science, and such as had the ability to stand in the king's palace, and whom he might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. That is quite literally the whole pagan institutions of Babylon. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. We'll revisit the king's meat momentarily. Now among these were of the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, and to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego. It's interesting, we call them usually by their Babylonian names and not by their Hebrew names. Are we identifying more with Israel or Babylon? But Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. See that on the screen? Now God had brought Daniel into favor and tender love with the prince of the eunuchs. And the prince of the eunuchs said unto Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who has appointed your meat and your drink. Why should he see your faces, worse liking than the children which are of your sort? Then shall you make me endanger my head to the king. Then said Daniel unto Melzar, whom the prince of the eunuchs had set over, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, prove your servants, I pray you, 10 days, and let them give us pulse to eat and water to drink. Now, this is very interesting, you know. Verse 12, what is pulse? This is pulse, okay? And it's literally what that says there, okay? That is man ha-zaraim, okay? That's what that says in Hebrew. And what that means is literally, give me from the vegetables, okay? Or give me some of the vegetables. That's actually what it literally means in Hebrew if you were going to bring it over to English. So you can picture that there's all kinds of the king's meat that's on the table, and then there's some garnish, some vegetables, and, you know, just kind of the lettuce and the tomatoes and seeded food. That's what the word zara means in Hebrew, okay, and also in Aramaic. So zaraim means multiple. It's an abundance of seeds. So he says, give me some of the seeded food, all right? And which is literally anything that comes from seeds. That would be your nuts. That can be your legumes. That can be your anything plant-based. It can be fruits. It can be vegetables. Whatever it is that comes from seed. Okay? So it's seeded food. So he's literally saying to Melzar, just give us for 10 days, please. Let us just not have to eat this. Just give us some of that stuff for 10 days. And see. Just give us water to drink. We don't want anything fancy. Just give us water, please. And then let our countenances be looked upon before thee, and the countenances of them that eat the portion of the king's meat. And as thou seest, deal with thy servant. So he consented to them in this matter, and he proved them 10 days. And at the end of the 10 days, their countenances appeared fairer and fatter in flesh than all the children that did eat the portion of the king's meat. Well, that makes, in some respects, a lot of sense. They were, because when you have seeded food, it's already filled with water. All right? And now they're also drinking water. The king's wine would actually dehydrate. It would have a withering kind of effect on them. And so you have this very interesting illustration. All right? So when we look at this, it says, and Melzar took away the portion of their meat and the wine that they should drink, and gave them pulse. Literally, he gave all of the vegetarian diet. He said, well, this is so good, I'm going to give it to everybody. This is such a good diet. I want all of them to look this good when they stand before the king. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So they got more wisdom. But further than that, Daniel became very, very wise. Now at the end of the days, that the king had said he should bring them in, then the prince of the eunuch brought them before Nebuchadnezzar. And the king communed with them, and among all that was found, there was found none like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in all matters of wisdom and understanding that the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and astrologers that were in his realm. And Daniel continued even to the first year of King Cyrus. Notice it says that he continued up until that time. It doesn't say that he went past that time. You know, we only have a little record of Daniel's life when he passed that time. Most of the book that we have of Daniel goes until the fall of Babylon, the first year of Darius, when Cyrus is still giving the preference to Darius. And eventually, then the first year of Cyrus will come after the reign of Darius. There's kind of a joint rule, but you can see that one receives a preference before the other because Cyrus was giving that honor to Darius. So he continues to the first year of Cyrus. Well, we only actually have one prophecy of Daniel that goes until that time. There's only one. And so because there's only one, we want to understand the significance of that one. And what was the effect on Daniel in that one prophecy? And what was the effect before that he had in relation to heavenly matters and wisdom and understanding and so forth? So let's look at that. First off, why would he go with Paul's food? His very identity is being shaken to the core. His name, which was a Hebrew name to identify him with the God of the Bible, which is also a reminder that God is judge, right? Because Daniel means judgment of God, or judged of God, can also mean a judge of God. It's all meaning the same thing. In Hebrew, semantically, the semantic field is very, very large for that name. And of course, he doesn't want to be one who is judged of God, which would be what happens if he absolutely submerses himself into the Babylonian culture, starts worshiping Babylonian idols, and starts forgetting about the law of his God. Right? Then his name will have a really prophetic meaning against him. It already had a pretty significant meaning because the judgment of God had come on Jerusalem and he was carried into Babylon. But will he be judged favorably? We see a lot of his visions all dealing with judgments, the judgments of the kingdoms of this world. A judgment where the sanctuary will be cleansed. A judgment against the prince of the host. So there's a lot of judgment, and then there's a great warfare leading up to the judgment of the kings of this world. So the whole thing, that was his whole prophetic ministry, and his name was very important. A lot was hinging on how he would relate to Babylon. Would he fall and be like a Babylonian? Would he forget his Hebrew identity? Would he now liken himself to be related to Bel, which is Belteshazzar? That's what his name was from. Bel being the dragon god of Babylon. Is he now going to go after the serpent? Right? And is he going to be turned aside by the serpent? This would bring him back, just by the very name that they're trying to put on him. It would bring him right back to Eden, to the serpent, to the temptation in the garden. And so he would remember. And so what did God say to Adam? In Genesis 1:29, and God said, "Behold, I have given you every herb-bearing seed," Zara, like Zaraim. So give me some of the Zaraim. Right? Give me some of the seed. Seeded food, right? So I've given you every herb-bearing seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for meat. So everything in the garden that was seen was seeded food. Food that comes from more seed, which comes into more seed, reproducing, having life to give from one to another, all from source. And so we can see that he's going back to the time of innocency. He's reminding himself, if I fell to this indoctrination process, if I become immersed into this cultural identity, and I lose hold of the law of God, and I transgress against my God, and I become turned aside like Eve was by the serpent, and through his subtlety, I will surely be judged, I will surely perish. I will surely die. He didn't want to defile himself at all. So he cleaves to the diet of Adam before the fall. Now, does that mean that it would have been sin for him to eat meat? No. No. What was the issue with the king's meat? Well, the kings in the Babylonian culture are intimately joined to the priests. And the priests made sacrifices that were very, they would sacrifice unclean animals, in some cases, lizards, for example. There was the Assyrian kings, which actually built up the walls of Babylon, by the way, who dedicated their altar to Ishtar. They slew 120 lions. I mean, they slay a lot of unclean beasts. But not just unclean beasts. It's going much further than this. All right? What were the meats that defiled? In Leviticus chapter 11, verses 43 through 47, says, "You shall not make for yourself abominable with any creeping thing that creepeth, neither shall you make yourselves unclean with them, that you should be defiled thereby. For I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore sanctify yourselves, and you shall be holy, for I am holy." By the way, it was also Moses, when he wanted to draw near to God, what did he have to do? It says, sanctify yourself. Could it be that your food, if you want to draw near to God, you need to be mindful of what you're putting in your body? People will begin to rise up and kind of want to tussle over that. But let's keep going, because that's exactly how Moses drew near to God, is he had to sanctify himself first. For several days he did so. Sanctify a fast. Rend your heart and not your garments. What does he say? You shall therefore sanctify yourselves and shall be holy, for I am holy. Neither shall you defile yourselves with any manner of creeping thing that creeps upon the earth, for I am the Lord that brings you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. You shall therefore be holy, for I am holy. This is the law of the beasts and of the fowl and of the living creature that moves in the water and every creature that creepeth upon the earth, to make a difference between the clean and the unclean, and between the beast that may be eaten and the beast that may not be eaten. Notice it doesn't say that you may know that no beast shall be eaten. It doesn't say that. It says that make sure to make a distinction. So it's very likely that the king's meat consisted of unclean meats, defiling meats. He wasn't saying, that a lot of Jews today, they say, well, preservation of life is more important than whether something is clean or unclean, and I disagree. When your mind begins to have the dissonance urged against it, that what is clean and what is unclean is of no consequence, you begin to blur that line, you'll begin to find yourself on the slippery slope down to perdition. So we want to make sure that we don't go there. Another thing that would make food unclean, blood. Deuteronomy 12, verse 23 and 24, "Only be sure that thou shalt not eat of the blood." That's a commandment, just like the clean and unclean meats. These are commandments. "For the blood is the life, and you may not eat the life with the flesh. Thou shalt not eat it. You shall pour it upon the earth as water." Why in the blood? Why can't you consume blood? There's lots of reasons why you can't consume blood. There's so many reasons. The blood is the way through which all of our cells are oxygenated. So the oxygen, the breath of life, all right? The oxygen is carried through the blood, okay? Blood also carries nutrients throughout the body into the various organs. But it also does more than that. It carries toxins and chemicals and pathogens. And that gets filtered through the liver and the kidneys to be put out of the body. But when your liver is overloaded, it begins to deposit itself in your spine. It begins to deposit itself in all kinds of different areas in your body. And it makes you very, very ill, very, very sick. And this is what leads to all kinds of diseases and cancer. We know that blood has excessive iron, which can cause hemochromatosis, and the body can't process blood as a food source. I think that should be obvious, but you still see people having, a rare steak, hardly cooked at all, filled with blood. Very serious. And even if you cook it out, it's still, if it had toxins in the blood and the blood it was cooked with, it's still going to have the toxins at the end. I mean, there's more disagreeable reasons for not eating meat in our time. What about wine? Why wouldn't he want to have wine? Well, you remember the priests. You remember Nadab and Abihu. They became drunken with wine. It says, do not drink wine nor strong drink, you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tabernacle of the congregation, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that you may put a difference between the holy and the unholy, the unclean and the clean, and that you may teach the children of Israel all the statutes which the Lord has spoken unto them by the hand of Moses. You can't teach anything if you haven't taught yourself. What I mean is that unless you are walking in the thing, how can you dare lift up your voice to teach another? You can't. We have to be abiding by those things which we're teaching. And so this was a very serious issue. Daniel knows if the priests in the holy place that were drawing near to God could have their judgment distorted, and they would not be approved before God, they would not be blameless. I want to not just go back to the time of innocency with Adam's diet. I don't want to spoil my discernment. I want to do as the priests would do as they sanctify themselves. I want to draw near to God. I just want water. Right? Very serious reason why they were to stay sober in their priestly ministration. And there was the blessing of God that rested upon them as a result of doing this. As for these 4 children, God gave them knowledge and skill in all learning and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. We know that they were found 10 times better. But Daniel only continues this till the first year of Cyrus. So what happened to all the wisdom and the understanding and all these things? What about the visions and the dreams and all these things that he's being given? Is he spiritually stunted because of that now? Because he decides maybe to go back to meat? He decides, well, king's meat, I'm not eating the king's meat anymore. I can have whatever meat I want. So is there an issue with that? What happened to Daniel? You know that not only did the rest of the wise men have their diets changed, but it actually saved their lives. The fact that God had so blessed Daniel. Daniel had blessed him to be able to understand dreams and visions. Nebuchadnezzar was demanding in Daniel chapter 2, not just the dream that was forgotten by him. He was also asking for the understanding of it. And so it was to Daniel that the dream was revealed in the night. And so they were seeking after God. They were looking for this answer, and it was Daniel, because of the health message, that he was able to have the interpretation thereof, the understanding in all dreams and visions. Had Daniel 1 not been a thing, where he just decided to have the king's meat and the wine, well, they would have all perished together. But now, because of Daniel, he actually saved all of the rest of the wise men, the magi, the Chaldeans, the astrologers. Very interesting. It says, then Daniel went to his house and made the thing known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions, that they would desire the mercies of the God of heaven concerning the secret, and that Daniel and his fellows should not perish with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. That was the goal, but it went further than that. God used it for salvation for all of them. Then was the secret revealed unto Daniel in a night vision. Then Daniel blessed the God of heaven. We know that in Daniel 4, it was Daniel that had understanding in dreams and visions. And he gave the understanding regarding Nebuchadnezzar's vision to Nebuchadnezzar concerning the vision of the 7 times, the vision of the great tree. the band of iron and brass. He knew specifically what the interpretation would be because it was the very same judgment that was a heavenly judgment appointed that was according to the Torah. It was a judgment that you find in the book of Leviticus. So because of that, he had much understanding about this. But if he had forgotten the law of God because of the king's wine, he wouldn't have had this. Daniel 5, he gives the understanding of the matter with the handwriting on the wall. And then we see that it even goes up to a deeper spiritual reality as he's moving along. Daniel chapter 7, angels give Daniel understanding after he sees a dream in the night. He sees the lion with the wings. He sees the bear with the 3 ribs leaning on one side. He sees the leopard with the 4 heads, with the 4 wings. He sees the great, dreadful beast with iron teeth and iron nails, with 10 horns. He sees the little horn. He sees the 3 horns uprooted. He sees all these things. And then he begins to see the Ancient of Days on the throne as judgment is set, and the little horn is judged against. He sees the Son of Man, the Messiah, the Prince, coming before the Ancient of Days and receiving the kingdom. And now he wants to have understanding because some of these things are becoming very profound and he doesn't have understanding. So he asks one of these multitudes of angels, like, what is this? And the understanding is given to him. So he's able to communicate with angels that are standing in his dreams. Daniel 8, Gabriel visits Daniel and gives Daniel understanding. He has the vision, then Gabriel is commanded to give him understanding. So he has still understanding. God is now, not just because of his diet, but he's actually supernaturally being given commands, that angels are being given commands to give him, to impart the understanding of that which is needful. Daniel 9, Gabriel continues to give Daniel more understanding because not all of the elements of understanding were all in place in Daniel chapter 1. And then after this would have been the first year of Cyrus. There's only one prophecy left for Daniel. We have Daniel chapter 10, 11, and 12. It's actually one prophecy. It's not like 3 prophecies or 2 prophecies. Or Daniel 10, 11, and 12 in the Hebrew are one continuous narrative. And you can actually read it like that in your Bible. He gives the very first verse as an introduction, and then he speaks about all of the events of all the things that happened in chapter 10. Okay? Now, this is very important for us to understand that it's one prophecy. And Daniel didn't get any other prophecies that we know of that are recorded in the Bible after Cyrus' reign besides this one. And when he gets this one, there's a very unusual condition of things that are taking place. Remember, Daniel has spoken with angels. Angels have imparted to him understanding. He's seen it in dreams. He's seen it in visions. And you'll see that the state of Daniel has changed after the first year of Cyrus. There's a weakness and degeneracy that has come upon him. Normally, you can stand in the holy presence of God and not be destroyed. But even in Daniel chapter 8 at the end, there was so much glory with Gabriel and with all of this vision that he was seeing that he actually became sick. So you can actually see that the revelations can make you really ill. Too much revelations of God, there's a supernatural effect where the Holy Spirit, it's contrary to the flesh. We are so degraded in our bodies that it's very difficult at times for God to communicate with man because his mind is not able to, and his vessel, his body is not able to always receive the revelations without becoming very ill. God has a very difficult matter on his hands. How is he going to do this? How is he going to relate revelation to us and not destroy us in the process? And that's what we see with the Mountain Sinai, right? We have 3 degrees. We have those at the base of the mount, couldn't go forward lest they peek through and they perish. There was the 70 elders. They're able to look at God's feet, the paved sapphire under his feet, and they're able to behold that and not die. Moses could behold much more, but he could only behold the back parts, and he could get much closer to the glory, but he couldn't see God's face and live. So God is giving as much as you're able to bear, but here's the thing, Daniel was not able to bear as much as he was able to bear before. How? Daniel 10, you have the archangel Gabriel revealing the glory of God to Daniel. And the effect that this has on Daniel is very serious. And then after Gabriel strengthens Daniel, twice he has to do this, because it wasn't enough to strengthen him once. The angel had to do it twice because it was too much for him to bear. He was very, very weak. Then Gabriel continues to give the prophecy. And then Daniel 12, he finishes the prophecy, and then he begins to give the understanding, the interpretation thereof, with prophetic time elements. That's where you get the 1260, 1290, and 1335. Okay? Daniel 10, verse 1, it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus the king. 2 years already. 2 years. 2 years Daniel's been having an experience where he's no longer been eating the diet he was during all the 70 years of Babylon, the Babylonian captivity. In the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a thing was revealed unto Daniel, whose name was called Belteshazzar, and the thing was true, but the warfare was long. And he understood the thing and had understanding of the vision. Okay? And the reason he had understood the thing and understanding of the vision is because the angel came and gave it to him. Told him. Okay? But what was he doing when he received this thing that was revealed to him that he might understand it? Pretty interesting. We're going to read verse 2. I will read starting at verse 2. It says, in those days I, Daniel, was mourning 3 full weeks. I ate no pleasant bread, neither came flesh nor wine in my mouth. Neither did I anoint myself at all till 3 whole weeks were fulfilled. You realize that he had to go. It doesn't say he didn't eat anything. He was eating pulse. He was drinking water. He wasn't drinking wine. He wasn't having flesh. He wasn't eating bread. I mean, this is obvious. He goes back to the diet in all those years where he had understanding. He had revelation, where he had visitations of angels. What was the results? And in the 24th day of the 1st month, I was by the great river, which is the Hiddekel, by the way, means that he didn't keep the Passover. He fasted all through the fast of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. He ate no meat. He was mourning. His fasts were turned into sorrow. The joy, the feasts were turned into fast. His joy was turned into sorrow. Then I lifted up mine eyes, and behold, a certain man clothed in linen, whose loins were girded with fine linen of Uphaz. His body was like the beryl, and his face as the appearance of lightning, and his eyes as lamps of fire, and his arms and his feet like in color to polished brass, and the voice of his words like the voice of a multitude. As he sees him, he looks like how John described Christ. This looks like Michael the archangel. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision. For the men that were with me saw not the vision, but a great quaking fell upon them, that they fled to hide themselves. So it's almost like the second coming in a way. Therefore I was left alone and saw this great vision, and there remained no strength in me. For my comeliness was turned in me into corruption, and I retained no strength. And yet heard I the voice of his words, and when I heard the voice of his words, then I was in a deep sleep upon my face, and my face toward the ground. Have you ever read your Bible and you just find yourself falling asleep, or you're listening to a sermon and you're just falling asleep? What's going on? What is this? What has happened? Daniel, you were able to listen to so many things in the past. What is going on with you? And behold, a hand touched me and set me upon my knees and upon the palms of my hands. And he said to me, the same angel, this is Gabriel. Gabriel so nearly reflects Christ that he looks in appearance like Christ. And he said unto me, O Daniel, a man greatly beloved, understand the words that I speak unto thee, and stand upright. For now I am sent, to you I am sent. And when he had spoken this word, I stood trembling. So the hand touches him and helps him up when he has no strength, and he's in a deep sleep. He's awake now. He's got enough strength to be awake in the presence of God, as it's revealed through the angel. But it says, then said he unto me, fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that thou didst set thine heart to understand and to chasten thyself before thy God, thy words were heard, and I am come for thy words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days. But lo, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, and I remained with the kings of Persia. Now I am come to make you to understand what shall befall your people in the latter days. For yet the vision is for many days. That's exactly what was stated. Sorry, I just got a message here. That's exactly what was stated already. And when he had spoken such words unto me, I set my face toward the ground, and I became dumb. And I became like the similitude, the image of the sons of men. And behold, one like the similitude of the sons of men touched my lips, and then opened my mouth, and spake, and said unto him that stood before me, O my Lord, by the vision my sorrows are turned upon me, and I have retained no strength. For how can the servant of this my Lord talk with this my Lord? For as for me, straightway there remain no strength in me, neither is there any breath left in me. Then there came again and touched me one like the appearance of a man, and he strengthened me. He said, O man greatly beloved, fear not. Peace be unto thee, be strong. Yea, be strong. And when he had spoken unto me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for thou hast strengthened. Daniel didn't have deep revelation. He had, when he was eating flesh and drinking wine. That's it. He had the revelations, and look at, he had to be strengthened twice by heavenly intelligences. He had to be strengthened twice. Could that account for the 2 years that he had been consuming wine and drinking, eating meat and drinking wine? What about those who have spent their whole life doing this? Must angels come to us 30 times? How weak are we? So what about quail? You say, well, you know, he gave quail to them in the wilderness. Isn't it so? He gave them meat in the wilderness. Look at this. Psalm 78, 23 to 29. Though he had commanded the clouds from above and opened the doors of heaven, and had rained down manna upon them to eat, and had given them of the corn of heaven, man did eat angels' food. He sent them meat, or that is food, to the full. He caused an east wind to blow in the heaven, and by his power he brought in the south wind. He rained flesh also upon them as dust. Was that the plan? Obviously not, because that's what they were crying for. It says, and feathered fowls like the sand of the sea. And he let it fall in the midst of their camp, round about their habitations. So did they eat, and they were filled. For he gave them their own desire. It doesn't say that he gave them his desire. His desire was angels' food. His desire was a deathless diet. They wanted and they demanded death. They wanted meat to satisfy their lust. It was God's permissive will, but it was not his express will. And why did God want that? Because he wants to feed us with revelation like he would communicate with the angels. He wants us to come to the place of communion as the angels have it. Psalm 106, verse 13 through 15, what was the result of this? It says, they soon forgot his works. They waited not for his counsel, but lusted exceedingly in the wilderness and tempted God in the desert. And he gave them their request, but sent leanness into their soul. Spiritually, something affects you when you eat dying matter. You can do it. Doesn't say that you can't. You can do it as long as it's not unclean foods, as long as it's not blood. You can eat it. God will let you eat it. You're not sinning if you eat it. But know that for this, God will send leanness into your soul. And know that for this, it is not his desires you're fulfilling, but your own. And it is separated from his express will. And you're just on kind of a tightrope right now in his permissive will. That's why quail. It wasn't good for them. Leanness into your soul. Manuscript 38, 1898. The Lord plainly told his people that every blessing would come to them if they would keep his commandments and be a peculiar people. He warned them through Moses in the wilderness, specifying that health would be the reward of obedience. The state of the mind has largely to do with the health of the body, and especially with the health of the digestive organs. As a general thing, the Lord did not provide his people with flesh meat in the desert, because he knew that the use of this diet would create disease and insubordination. Some people will say, well, that's extreme. No, spiritually you become lean. You don't become a mighty man in the Lord. You don't become strong in the Lord when you're feeding on death, when you're feeding on the flesh. He did not provide them because he knew that it would create disease and insubordination. In order to modify the disposition and bring the higher powers of the mind into active exercise, he removed from them the flesh of dead animals. He gave them angels' food, manna from heaven. In fact, he allowed, because of sin, the priests to eat meat. But when you look at, first off, he limited the portions that they could have. Additionally, when you look at the term limits of their priesthood, they did not get to live out even half their years officiating as a priest. High priest had to stop when he was 50. That was the limit. High priest had to stop when he was 50. Aaron lived till he was 120. That's 70 years where he's not officiating as a priest. Weakness? Leviticus 17, verses 8 through 9. We have to understand the sacrifices in the wilderness. It was like, there was limitations, right? There was a lot of limitations. If we look, there's actually 2 different passages in the Bible that are very clear. That they could only sacrifice. They couldn't just rear up an altar wherever they wanted in the land of Israel. They couldn't do it. They weren't allowed to do it. They only could go to the place where God had set his priesthood and his tabernacle or temple. It says, and you shall say unto them, whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that offers a burnt offering or sacrifice, and brings it not to the door of the tabernacle of the congregation to offer it unto the Lord, even that man shall be cut off from among his people. You couldn't just slay it and not bring the blood to the tabernacle. That sounds strange. What if they just wanted to eat meat? There was provision for some of that, or they could do that. There was provision when they were in the land, but it was very constrained. And when it came to the sacrifices of the animals, They had to make sure that they were consuming the right things at the right place, at the right time, and so forth. It wasn't, and they had to be doing the right things in pouring out the blood. What was going on in the wilderness and what was going on in the land of Israel, there wasn't so much room that they could have eaten a great abundance of meat. Now, if they had caught something through hunting, like a deer, they were allowed to do it, but there was explicit commandment to drain out the blood and pour it out as water. Now, as it was in the days of Noah, we're told in Matthew 24, verse 37 through 39, but as it was in the days of Noah, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until that day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew it not until the flood came and took them all away. So also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. What were they eating and what were they drinking before the flood? No, they were marrying and giving in marriage. But you know that Adam was given a very specific diet. Were they actually eating meat at this time? Well, we know that they were marrying and giving in marriage, and it was compromised marriages. It was evil marriages. What about eating and drinking? You don't find that anywhere in the Bible. But you do find it in 1 Enoch, chapter 3, verse 13 through 15. It says, and they, that's speaking in context of the sons of Seth, conceived from them the daughters of Cain, and bore unto them great giants, and their height was in cubits as 3 oxen. And they were, that which is pretty big, an oxen to me is like this, so you got 3 oxen, it's like 21 feet or something. It is big. They were begotten and multiplied upon the earth according to their kind, and grew exceedingly, and devoured all the labors of the sons of men until men could not sustain them. And the giants turned against them, that they might devour them. And they began to sin against birds of the air, and beasts of the earth, and creeping things that creep upon the earth, and the fish of the sea, and to devour their flesh one after another, and to drink the blood thereof. Then did the earth make accusation against the ungodly concerning all things that were done upon it. Is that eating and drinking? It's eating and drinking, right? As it was in the days of Noah. In a very old manuscript from the Syriac, the Aramaic, a very interesting manuscript, by the way, because it has a very pertinent reading when it says, he says, I am telling you today, you shall be with me in paradise. You know, the thief on the cross. It actually reads it in proper order, where it's very clear that he says, today I am telling you, you shall be with me in paradise. You can't actually mix up the words like it is in the Greek. This is a very interesting manuscript, very old reading manuscript that is existing. They say it's a very, very ancient reading. Look at what it says here. It says, take heed, this is a translation of it, take heed that your hearts become not heavy with the eating of flesh, and with the intoxication of wine, and with the cares of the world, and that the day come upon you suddenly. For as a snare will it come upon all who dwell upon the face of the earth. Yeah, you've heard this verse before, but you've never heard it quite like that, right? Very, very interesting. You say, well, Jesus ate fish. Actually, you know, in this manuscript, it's interesting. It says that when they made him fish and bread, it says that he took some and then he gave what was left over. It doesn't say that he ate everything. So I thought that was interesting too. What about the apostles? I'm going to finish here because I think that it's interesting when we look at the Apocrypha, what did the apostles eat? What was their diet? Because the apostles were walking very closely with God, right? In the preachings of Peter, which we know was an apocryphal text, which the early church had used, Clement of Alexandria quotes from it, and we have it in several different sources. We have several of his preachings still today that have survived in several of these older church orders. It says that these are just different quotes from the Apostle Peter regarding the lives of the apostles. And this was recorded from Peter's preachings by Clement, which was one of his disciples. You have a lot of these disciples that survived, and they recorded the words of the apostles that raised them up as bishops. All right, and they were part of the Smyrna church, from Ephesus to Smyrna. And so this is what is recorded by Clement regarding Peter, what he said about the apostles. That John never ate meat. That James was a Nazirite, by the way, the brother of the Lord. He lived on seeds and plants and touched neither meat nor wine. For the apostle Thomas, it says he continually fasts and prays and abstains from the eating of flesh. The apostle Matthew partook of seeds and nuts, hard-shelled fruits and vegetables without flesh. Peter was a lot more sensitive in his diet. It's very obvious. He says, I live on olives and bread, to which I rarely only add vegetables. So it wasn't like one marked out diet for everybody. But this is what he says. The unnatural eating of flesh meats is as polluting as the heathen worship of devils. Pretty harsh. And the things which are well-pleasing to God are these, to pray to him and to ask from him, recognizing that he is the giver of all things and gives with discriminating law, or with a discerning law, to abstain from the table of devils, not to taste dead flesh, not to touch blood, to be washed from all pollution, and the rest in one word, as the God-fearing Jews have heard. Do you also hear, and be of one mind in many bodies. Let each man be so minded to do to his neighbor those good things he desires for himself. This is not just Peter, though. We have early church testimony in abundance in many other records which say the same things. Eusebius wrote the history of the church, and he writes those things in the proof of the Gospels. He says, the apostles embraced and persevered in a strenuous and a laborious life with fasting and abstinence from wine and meat. Clement of Alexandria says, and happiness is found in the practice of virtue. Accordingly, the apostle Matthew partook of seeds and nuts, hard-shelled fruits and vegetables without flesh. Okay. The Acts of Thomas, chapter 20, this was what his disciples recorded regarding him when he was in India. It says, he continually fasts and prays, and abstaining from the eating of flesh and the drinking of wine. He only eats bread with salt, drinks only water, and wears the same garment in weather and winter, accepting nothing from anyone, and gives whatever he has to others. That was Thomas. And again from Eusebius, who quotes from another document from Hegesippus, which is not extant right now. We only have parts of it. Says, James, a brother of the Lord, was holy from his mother's womb. It means he was actually a Nazirite. He was consecrated from the womb. And he drank no wine nor strong drink, neither did he eat flesh. Doesn't say that all of the apostles didn't eat flesh. I'm sure that many of them did, right? Paul sounds like he ate flesh quite freely, but not necessarily all of them. There's a great danger if we overstate matters. I can't say that all the apostles didn't, but it sounds like many of them, if not all of them, did, because they were trying to be closer to God. They didn't all have the same diet. But generally speaking, it was a pretty well mapped out diet for them. But it wasn't just one specific thing for for all the people.